This is not only a comparison, but also a celebration, and sadly, a commiseration. The Lexus LC 500 and Jaguar F-Type are both luxury two-doors, but what really connects them are the V8s under their respective bonnets. So today we'll find out which is best, but more importantly, pay tribute to the engines that make them great. Before we get into it, like this video, subscribe to the Carsales channel, and let us know what you love about V8s in the comments below. Before we get into it, keen observers will notice the Jaguar is a coupe and the Lexus is a convertible. Not ideal, but the opposite numbers of each were both in Sydney, so it would have been the same wherever we did the test, albeit reversed. The F-Type will soon cease production, bringing to an end its decade-long lifespan as Jaguar transitions to a pure electric future. Whether or not the 2020 facelift improved the looks is a matter of some debate. The Ian Callum penned original was always going to be hard to improve upon, and it remains a very stylish machine. A car you definitely find yourself looking back at once you've parked it. The Lexus LC styling is a lot more divisive, and chopping the roof off only makes it more so, but it definitely turns heads. Personally, I love it. Even after almost 7 years on sale, it still looks like a concept car come to life. It's not too awkward with the roof up, and the profile with the roof down is just stunning. There is a fair price disparity here. A few options lifting the Jaguar to almost $300,000 plus on-road costs, while the Lexus is a relative bargain at around $220,000 plus on-roads, about 15 grand more than the coupe. Nevertheless, if you're spending this much, price is unlikely to be a deal breaker. This is what we're here to celebrate, because I guarantee that when or if these cars are replaced, what's under here is going to be very, very different. In fact, there's a good chance that there won't be anything under there at all. We have two 5-litre V8s, but the Jaguar is supercharged, so obviously it's much more powerful, which along with all-wheel drive means it's much, much quicker. It's also meant to be more economical, but it's not really. Both cars are covered by 5-year unlimited kilometre warranties, but Jaguar also throws in 5 years of servicing for free, whereas you'll need around $3,500 for the Lexus over the first 5 visits, which isn't actually that bad at this end of the market. Cozy is probably the word that best describes the F-Type's interior, though the glass roof does make it feel more expansive. Very driver focused, can be a bit tricky to get the perfect driving position, but you get there in the end. Everything's within easy reach, and great stereo, arguably a bit too good as it tends to vibrate most of the interior. All the surfaces are soft and leathery. I love the theatre in here, the way the start-stop button pulses like a heartbeat, the way the vents rise out of the dash, though some of the others on the test have questioned whether it feels $300,000 special in here. The infotainment's okay, plenty of features, and it works well enough, easy enough to navigate, though can be a bit unresponsive at times. The other issue is storage. There's center console here, but if you're two up, the bags are going to have to go in the boot. You might be able to get them behind the seats here, but then they're tricky to get out. The inside of the Lexus isn't as wild as the outside, but there are still plenty of curves and shapes and angles in here. I have to start though with the biggest and most recent change to this car, and that is a touchscreen infotainment system. Thank you, Lexus. Thank you on behalf of everyone who has sworn and screamed and cursed at that stupid mouse or trackpad that has been the scourge of every Lexus for years. Like the Jag, it's not actually the slickest unit in the world, but this alone makes the LC 1,000 times easier to live with. The rest of the interior is lovely. Plenty of nice materials, the exception being this sort of fake plastic metal, which always gets a bit grubby, but great driving position, head-up display, plenty of storage in this center console, the world's coolest dials from the Lexus LFA, and as you'd expect for a Lexus, it all feels exquisitely put together. One last thing to mention though is that the doors are very big and very heavy, and that's pretty standard for most coupes, but park this thing on an incline and you're definitely going to feel it. There are also back seats, which you can forget about putting people in for the most part, but there are ISOFIX points, so as long as you don't need to take a front passenger, you can squeeze a kid's seat back there if need be. The Lexus gets the nod for infotainment thanks to wireless smartphone mirroring and charging, and it's a bigger, clearer screen, though it would be nice if it was a little more responsive. Both cars have all the active safety equipment you'd expect at this price point, and both are remarkably well calibrated. Lane assist, collision warning and the like rarely intervene in normal driving, which is refreshing, and rear cross traffic alert is actually helpful with such heavily restricted rear vision. The F-Type is the clear winner when it comes to carrying stuff. Its hatch actually gives it a pretty decent amount of luggage space, as long as you're not trying to carry anything too big. The LC500's boot, on the other hand, is absolutely tiny. The coupes isn't too bad, but now most of it is filled with roof. Soft bags or the groceries are fine, but you can leave the golf clubs at home. But we're interested in a very different sort of driving, so let's see how these two stack up on the road. I'll go through the whole car, but let's start with the catalyst for this comparison, which is the V8 up front. Especially in the Jag, as the engine absolutely dominates the experience. It's like there is a volcanic eruption under the bonnet. We're becoming more accustomed to blistering speed as EVs become more commonplace, but it's a different experience when it's accompanied by noise. It's just more difficult to concentrate on what's going on, but it's like the air's being ripped apart around you. I suspect this means the F-Type R won't be for everyone, as it really is properly antisocially loud and aggressive. But it's also pretty fantastic. You have to be quite gentle and quite smooth with your initial throttle application, as it really can be quite sharp, especially if you're in dynamic mode, which if you're driving with any enthusiasm, you probably will be. From there though, being supercharged means there's just this massive wall of power, all the way to almost 7,000 RPM. Supercharging kind of went out of favour a bit as turbo technology improved, as it's not a particularly efficient way to make power, but no arguing with the results. Okay, so what about the rest of the car? Gearbox works pretty well, some of the changes can be a bit slurry, brakes are very good, but there are some interesting details dynamically. If you select dynamic mode, the default setting is for everything to go to maximum attack, as you might expect. But if you go into the center screen, you can adjust individual parameters, and it makes quite a big difference to how the F-Type feels. Full dynamic might be the pick on a racetrack, but on the road I find that backing off the steering in particular makes for a nicer experience. It lightens it up and makes precise inputs easier. And that's important because the F-Type is quite pointy. And by that I mean the front end responds really, really well. But I'll come back to that in a sec. The suspension can go either way. In dynamic, the car is better tied down, but it can feel to fight the bumps a bit, not so much absorbing them as bouncing off them. Go softer and it works with the road better, but then there's more body movement which has to be accounted for. Now this is all a bit granular. I can probably sum it up best as cohesion. It's a slight lack of cohesion that would become very apparent if I stepped into, say, a Porsche 911. Zoom out a bit though, and the F-Type is wild. A proper animal. Not just outrageously fast in a straight line, but it has extraordinary grip, in the dry at least, way beyond what you can exploit on the public road. In the wet, it's a bit more dicey. But isn't it all-wheel drive, I hear you ask? Well, yes, it is, but it appears the car often forgets, and you can be really slipping and sliding before the front wheels wake up. Combine quite poor traction, a very sharp front end, and very rear-biased all-wheel drive system, the result can be quite exciting, in a slightly white-knuckle sort of way. The LC500 is totally different. And I'm going to start with the bad stuff, but I promise I'll bring it back around. It's always frustrated me, this car, as I don't think it knows what it is or what it's trying to be. On the one hand, you've got this screaming, high-revving V8 and quite aggressive suspension, so you think, okay, it's a sports car. But it weighs well over 2 tons with me in it, and still feels pretty soft in the bends. So you think, okay, well maybe it's a GT. But then you really have to work this engine hard to get it to do anything, and the ride is often quite choppy and uncomfortable, so it's kind of stuck in no man's land. This is exacerbated by the convertible, as drive it with any gusto and it feels pretty wobbly. It shimmies and shakes through bends or over bumps and never feels like it's particularly enjoying itself. It's also got nothing like the outright pace or grip of the F-Type. But there are compensations, starting with this immense engine. Now this might sound a bit strange, but this isn't a particularly fast car. Blame that massive weight. But this naturally aspirated V8 is just so crisp, especially in Sport Plus, where it gets louder, the gear shifts become quicker. It's just so good. Now it lacks torque compared to the Jag and other turbo rivals, but that just means power continues to build and build and build as you get closer to redline, and it's a more cultured noise than the Jag too, less raucous. As mentioned in the dry, the LC500 convertible feels a bit floppy and a bit soft and a bit unhappy really, but the flip side to this in the wet is, how can I put this? Let's just say that in the wet, the LC500 will do all the rear wheel drive things you could ever want it to do. Whereas the Jag can be a bit white knuckle, this is just a massive laugh. Despite their mechanical similarities, these are two quite different cars. And while they could conceivably be cross-shopped, recommending one over the other is really down to the buyer's personal preferences. As a driver's car, the F-Type is a clear winner. It is so much faster and more adept than the LC, especially when it's a convertible. Though to be honest, the one to have is probably the cheaper rear drive F-Type. It's the one I'd have anyway. But that's also not really the point. This comparison was just an excuse to pay tribute to two stunning V8s while we still can. Of course, there will be great cars in the future. They aren't going to sound like this. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to the Car Sales channel, and let us know which cars we should compare in the comments below.